Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
What a save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nico Ladero leaves absolutely no doubt. The Sounders rule the region. Seattle Sounders is campeón. It's gone! It's gone! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Nice work on your little yacht thing.
And Portland can't say shit.
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Overcome seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
I think bizarre is probably a pretty good word for it.
As the game went on, you know, this was going to be an epic game because you could just see it.
I mean, to be quite honest, it was almost, at that point, it was almost comical.
Almost as if we were playing without a ref, but then again, we also had this guy in the center that really didn't know what he was doing.
Before the earth was made.
In sports, the word impossible is almost always an exaggeration. After all, if we saw it, it happened. That shot, that catch, that throw we thought we'd never see, turns out, impossible could be done. But every once in a while, even within those bounds, something so absurd happens that only fiction can provide context. Only fantasy, our imagination, can relate to something so unforeseeable, our view of sports just can't hold it. So it was on June 16th, 2015, that a legend was created. One that defied the history of Major League Soccer's most prominent rivalry. It's one that defined an MLS Cup contender season, and one that will forever be linked with one of the best players that U.S. soccer has ever produced. Sound hyperbolic? Perhaps it is. But nobody who actually saw the red card wedding unfold would say otherwise. What should have been an innocuous U.S. Open Cup match now lives on as a signature game in the decades-old rivalry between the Seattle Sounders and Portland Timbers. And, as you'll hear, the memory of that night still, years later, lives fresh in the minds of those who were on the field. For Nos Arietes, I'm Richard Farley, working in conjunction with Jeremiah O'Shan and Chris Rifer. This is Remembering the Red Card Wedding, featuring...
My name is Nat Borchers, and I was playing center back for the Portland Timbers.
Hi, this is Brad Evans, and I was a center back during the red card wedding.
Yes, Jeff Hosking. I was the assistant referee on the stands side, so AR2.
This is Jack Jewsbury of the Portland Timbers, captain and defensive midfielder.
Caleb Porter, head coach, Portland Timbers.
Hey, I'm Andy Rose. I played for the Seattle Sounders against Portland Timbers in the U.S. Open Cup in the game dubbed the Red Card Wedding.
We're also joined by the former voice of the Seattle Sounders, Ross Fletcher, and Seattle Sounders midfielder Lamar Neagle. To describe the red card wedding by its score alone doesn't do the night justice, because 3-1 just isn't that uncommon of a scoreline. To say the game went into extra time of a knockout competition and was waged between rivals helps a little, as does reminding everyone that one of these teams finished the night with only 7 men. But the absurdities of the night 2 years ago range from the most mundane of things, the weird throw-in calls, the uniforms, to some of the most inconceivable events you'd ever hear of from a soccer field. And Ross Fletcher was there to call it all.
So this is a night that so many Sounders fans have been looking forward to. US Open Cup, a tournament they had owned since coming into Major League Soccer. At Starfire, a place that was an absolute fortress, Seattle unbeaten in all their Open Cup games there, against their hated rivals, the Portland Timbers. Dimly lit field, poor surface, 4,000 baying fans screaming and throat rasping from only feet away from the players. They can feel them, smell them, almost touch them. It has a little bit of a feel of Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome.
Brad Evans.
You know, obviously it's going to be a testy match. It's Portland, Seattle. It's a small postage stamp of a field. It's a terrible turf field, which both teams are accustomed to playing on turf. So in saying that, it was still really bad. And that field plays very poorly.
Nat Borchers.
It hurts my knees and my Achilles tendons in particular just to think about playing on that pitch, because it is like they put a bunch of plywood down and then they threw over some green confetti and they just called it a field.
Caleb Porter.
I mean, they're like touching distance to you. You hear everything they're saying. And it was like that all game long. Literally, I was getting verbally abused all game long.
And little would we know that the setting will be overshadowed by the events. And it all started in innocuous but maybe bizarre fashion, setting the tone, the two kits the teams would wear. Portland Timbers come out in their home kit of green, and the Sounders in black. Now, this is a Seattle home game. Surely the Sounders are in rave green, but no. Often sponsorship obligations overtake tradition. But when you start watching the game, it's very clear that the referee, Daniel Radford, who will be a hugely controversial figure in this most remarkable of evenings, would let it play on with two teams in a dark place in dark kit going at it.
Jack Jewsbury.
I believe Brad Evans would have been their captain at the time. And him and I actually had a discussion because of the lighting and the sun. I believe it was a sunny day. And it was very difficult to tell. And we kind of knew before the kickoff that it might become a problem. And so I think the refs kind of kept their eye on it in the first half. But there was a point where him and I had a conversation, not a heated conversation, just a real conversation that, hey, you know, we're struggling to tell the difference between the two teams, because it was more of the shorts and the socks, if I remember right, than necessarily the top. So it was almost like you had to look at the shorts to make sure you were passing it to your right team.
AR2 Jeff Hosking.
In a typical MLS match, we are given the team colors well in advance, and so if there's any type of a conflict like that, we can solve it days in advance, usually up to like a week. Open Cup, you pretty much just show up, and you know there's not the league structure around those games. Before the game, we inspect both teams' uniforms. It's standard practice, and we held them right next to each other. And the problem was that both teams said these were the only jerseys that they brought. Portland said they only had these warm-up shirts, and so I believe they changed colors at halftime, if memory serves correct.
Seattle did end up changing into their white kits at halftime, but even now, it's still unclear how the two teams showed up intent on wearing such similar colors.
My kit man told me they refused to change. That's why, because we were told we were going to wear what was it? The green, but they wanted to wear the black, right? And we only brought green, and then last minute they said, well, they're not going to change. We have to change, so we don't have uniforms. And so they said, well, we're going to play in the black anyways. And I think they realized that it was really tough to see, so they changed at halftime, I think it was.
Right. Andy Rose, talking to us from England.
I love those jerseys. So I was a little bit annoyed for sure. It was just one of those things where as a player, you know, I had never experienced it before. I suppose it's one of those things that you just kind of, you just kind of get on with it, shake it off, not let it affect you.
The kits ultimately didn't have an impact on the game. But in hindsight, it was a strange harbinger, a sign that even in a contentious rivalry, this match would be a little bit different. Another bad omen? Some players on the field noticed that the man in charge with presiding over affairs seemed to be micromanaging things early on.
So this referee was very inexperienced coming in. Daniel Radford, lower level referee, but getting his chance effectively in the US Open Cup. And this is what US soccer like to do, and you can understand it, to give lower level referees a chance to prove themselves. They move them up in a competition. US Open Cup, not as prestigious as Major League Soccer or the CONCACAF Champions League or international soccer. So this is their moment to show if they can do it. The sad thing was, Daniel Radford, unlike Daniel Radcliffe, had no magic spells. He couldn't pull a trick out, and he would, for some reason, focus on little issues that didn't seem to make sense. Coming in, he knew it was going to be a broiling atmosphere between two really, really strong rivals, and instead of making sure that the discipline was right, I remember during the first half thinking, why is this referee focusing on throw-ins? For all of the things he could have been policing properly, he was seemingly obsessed with getting throw-ins taken from the right or wrong place and whether someone's foot was marginally over the line. Of all things to pick up on in a local derby, it was that. And that's when I first thought, there's something not quite right about the ability of this referee.
I remember now the foul throw calls against us, however many. I remember some really soft yellow card fouls. I remember the referee having no control over the game whatsoever. It was almost as if we were playing without a ref.
Lamar Neagle.
There'd be balls thrown in and the advantage would be lost just because he brought it back. I remember being pissed about that.
For Seattle, it got worse after halftime, albeit in a very different way. Early in the second period, after Diego Valeri struck to put the Timbers up 1-0, Daniel Radford made his first major impact of the match, taking note of Brad Evans, who was already carrying a yellow card.
I remember I was playing right back and Villafana comes forward, and I don't know if I had poked the ball away, but somehow he ended up on the ground on top of the ball. From my viewpoint, either when a player falls on top of the ball, the referee should blow a whistle because more than likely he's probably handballed it, or there's going to be a dangerous play. As soon as a player falls on the ball and he doesn't get up right away, there's going to be a dangerous play and somebody's going to get hurt or something stupid's going to happen. So I didn't hear a whistle. I see light of day, which is the ball, so I give it a poke, and sure enough, maybe 2 or 3 pokes, I'm not sure. He throws his hands up, referee second yellow, and I'm sent off.
Nat Borchers.
He gets sent off and you're thinking, wow, okay, now we really have an opportunity here. It's tied up, it's 1-1, and we've got the man advantage. Now we got to do something about that.
Do something about that actually understates what's going on here. Starfire wasn't just a fortress because of its close confines and terrible turf. The Sounders hadn't lost there. 4 victorious Open Cup runs were built in Tukwila, and the time Seattle had lost in the competition, they did so on the road. It was something Portland was well aware of coming into that game.
Thinking before this game that it would be an incredible opportunity to kind of jumpstart our season, because at the time we were kind of struggling. We knew they had never lost, in the Open Cup on that field. And like I said, we were kind of struggling, and I thought, great opportunity if we can win this game, to lift our season and maybe derail theirs a little bit.
Even before that season, Caleb had always talked to us about doing something that we had never done for this organization. Whatever that was, whether that was winning the Supporters' Shields, winning an MLS Cup. At that time, it would have been going into Seattle and beating them at Starfire, because no one, if I remember right, had done that in the past 10 years. So we wanted that. The group that was on the field that day wanted to do something that the Portland Timbers have never done in the Open Cup at Starfire.
So within that context, and with Brad Evans shown his second yellow card, that's when the emotions of the night started to peak.
Yeah, the bench is going crazy because it's on the side of Portland's bench, right in front of Portland's bench. So they go crazy, and their whole fans are sitting right behind there also. So they go crazy. And obviously this ref is influenced by factors in the game, and he let that one get over him. And as soon as I got my first yellow, I think it was soft. It may have been soft. I don't remember what it was. But the second yellow, knowing how soft it was and getting the red card, ultimately if I get into his face and scream and yell, it's going to accomplish the same exact thing as if I just walk off. And almost in a walk of not defiance, but throwing the hand in the air saying this is an absolute joke, and which it was, it was a joke call. But that, I guess, spiraled into, the death of our Open Cup run, obviously, and that undefeated run at Starfire too.
Andy Rose.
I don't think at that point we felt like the game was lost. It was just kind of like a little bit of a punch in the gut where you're like, okay, this is going to be that much harder, and it's frustrating, especially losing a guy like Brad, who of course, is a leader, and in tough moments, sometimes teams can rely on their veteran guys.
So Portland start to take charge of the game, they score, and Seattle think we've got to do something about it. This is a tournament in which we prided ourselves on winning it so many times. But they didn't want to use the stars. Clint Dempsey, Obafemi Martins. It's a busy run. Seattle have started the season terrifically well. They don't want to derail MLS. But at the same time, they don't want to lose at home to their biggest rivals in the Open Cup, a tournament they treasure. So on come Dempsey and Martins. Martins gets the equaliser, takes it to extra time, and you think this is going to go well. Even with 10 men, they've got a fighting chance here.
Playing with Oba was just such an incredible experience, and any time you have players like of that caliber on the pitch, you feel like you have a chance. It doesn't matter if you're down a man or maybe the referee is going against you at certain moments, little things aren't going your way. You always just feel like you have a chance, and countless time, throughout my years playing with Oba, it's just, you get a good feeling like, right, all we need to do is try and get him the ball in a couple dangerous places, and there's every chance he's going to be able to finish it for us. So massive relief. Like I said, some of those nights I look back on are some of my favorite nights as a player at Starfire with that crowd, and without a doubt that moment when suddenly you're back in this game was one that I'll always remember.
Yeah, I remember being frustrated, like thinking, we're up a man and we give up something, on a set piece, and it's like, really, are we really gonna, let them take this from us when we have this advantage? And I think it spurred us on. I remember, one player in particular, Rodney Wallace he's the guy who, was, one of our leaders on that team in terms of being able to flip that switch, being able to have that drive, that competitive edge to say, okay, it's not good enough. Let's do something about it.
But then, again, tragedy this time strikes with Martins going down injured, takes a cleat from a fallen Darlington Nagbe. Freak accident. Martins gets carted off on a stretcher. And you think at that point, wow, it looks serious. And I remember thinking to myself, this could be a really bad injury.
I remember him going down in the middle of the field and then thinking that was really bad. I mean, the injury was pretty bad. And then just kind of more worried about him than about the game, obviously, at the time.
I spent a lot of time with him in the locker room just because they were carrying him into the locker room so that I'm not even watching the game. And that was tough. He's like crying on the table because of what happened. He knows the severity of the injury.
It didn't just hurt us that night. It completely transformed our season. And MLS is one of those leagues, right? It's not easy to build a really sustainable team over the course of a season. You always have, 3 DPs and a couple extra players who are special, who are a little bit different. And for us, there's no doubt about that. Oba was our guy.
By the time Obafemi Martins was carted off, it was the 86th minute. But Seattle had already used all their substitutions, which meant tied 1-1, going into 30 minutes of extra time, Seattle was going to have to play 2 men down.
So I never relaxed till the game's done, because I've seen everything. And so, yeah, in that moment, I was still nervous, even though we were up 2 men, and, it still takes a good play to score, the goal to put it away. And at that point in time, I think what I said to the team was they're going to play for PKs, and we need to stay on the front foot. We need to keep pushing. not let them get out of the game. I think I remember saying, we can't let this team get out of this game. We need to, go for the jugular, get the goal, put them away. I think we pushed a little bit more because up until, if I remember correctly, up until that period, they had a few chances that I thought they almost scored. Maybe there was one chance where I thought maybe it was my, crazy worry. It wasn't there. But I remember one moment where I thought they're going to score on us up when we're up 2 men. You know what I mean? So right. I think after that, we were clearly in control after that period.
Because it was like, hey, we're up 2 men. If we give something up here, how's that going to make us look? We're obviously in a situation where we should win, and we have all the cards are stacked for us. We should make this happen. So I think the pressure was like just that much more pronounced because of that.
I remember just giving absolutely everything I had and just saying to myself, look, and I know the other guys on the pitch were saying the same things to themselves. Look, we've had some really special nights at this place, and this could be another one of those. And I don't know if I've ever ran so hard in a game before. I mean, at 1-1, yeah, you're thinking, okay, if we can defend for our lives, you never know. We might just catch them on the break. It's going to take a Goliath effort. I mean, we're going to have to be absolutely huge here. Without a doubt, there was no point where I or any of the other guys on the pitch stopped believing that we could turn it around and win that game.
Despite that optimism, Seattle gave up a goal within the first period of extra time, going down in the 100th minute when, after a rebound, Rodney Wallace put Portland in front 2-1.
I'm sure there was a sense of relief that we were able to get it. A lot of times, even if a team loses a man, they one of their forwards comes off and they sit in a little deeper. So it's not much. It's not much different in terms of breaking a team down. Now, obviously, 2 is a bit different, right. But it's still when it's. For them, it was probably a focus on that first 15 minutes and getting through it. So to be able to to break through in that first period, I think was huge for us. Sure. And it was definitely a sense of relief, but we knew that there was still some business to take care of.
I remember even thinking at 2-1, I was still, nervous because you just never know, and as crazy as that game was, you thought, in some ways there's more pressure.
I remember feeling as though we can still do this. Let's still do this. And I think we might have even had a couple of sort of half chances, a couple decent looks.
Yeah, I remember us not obviously having a lot of possession, but us getting down in their half a couple times in some dangerous areas. So I do remember thinking that we could possibly still tie this up and then bring it to PKs, which would have been, perfect for us.
So it's about the 110th minute that you start to see an incident that will go viral, will go worldwide. Portland have scored, they're 2-1 up, but Seattle are about to totally lose it. And when I say Seattle, I mean Clint Dempsey. Michael Azira, who's a very gentle guy, good competitor on the field, but doesn't mean harm to anyone, goes in for a challenge with Gaston Fernandez, leaves his arm awkwardly in the air, but definitely for me, no elbow. Fernandez sells it as such. Daniel Radford makes the decision to send him off. Out goes Azira. Seattle down to 8 men. But that's not the end of it. And at the time, I didn't realise exactly what Clint Dempsey was about to do or did do. But Dempsey goes over to the referee, complains vociferously, gets a yellow card. And then, unprecedentedness, and I've never seen anything like it in my 17-odd years of calling soccer games, takes the notebook out of the referee's top pocket and casually rips it up and flings it on the floor.
Yeah, I just remember thinking like there's no way. Anybody who knows Michael Azira, a red card is like the furthest thing from what you think. You know what I mean? He's not that type of player, and I just knew right away it wasn't a red card. And so when I saw the referee pull that out, it was shocking. And looking back, it's like a moment that you'd say would be kind of laughable, but you're so invested in the moment and so invested in the game. And at that point, we still had players playmakers on that pitch who could get us a goal out of nothing. We still had Clint on the pitch, and without a doubt, we were still believing, like, all right, we're going to get back into this thing. And so when that happened, it was, from a referee standpoint, the way the game had gone, it was just like, why is that necessary right now?
Again, Jeff Hosking, the assistant referee.
Michael Zira, challenged for the Portland player for the ball. The referee thought that it was straight-legged and into the shin of the Portland player, so he showed a red card. Like I said, there was already a lot of frustration from having to chase the game. It'd been a long night, and now they're down to 9 players already, and now with a red card, now they're down to 8. And that's when a lot of tempers flared, but there was an actual resignation of, all right, this is not going to happen for us tonight. And not only that, but obviously Seattle didn't agree with the red card, so that's when Dempsey made his opinions known, if you will, by coming up behind the referee and slapping the notebook out of his hand.
When have you ever seen a player react like that? Dempsey has totally lost it. Seattle have totally lost it. Dempsey then is carried off by his teammates, spitting and snarling and wanting to go back at the referee and really have it out with him. And that's the point you fear for more than just the game being lost to Daniel Radford's control. Could there have been crowd trouble? Could there have been bigger fights going on around?
I remember, I think it was Nat and I were kind of standing behind the play, and I think we just looked at each other and just kind of giggled at what we were seeing right now. But I remember also that it boiled over a little bit at that point, and there were a couple of us that were even separating some of the Seattle guys from the referee because it just didn't look pretty. Obviously, there were a lot of emotions going on and frustration from their side. So we were actually trying to, I think, help them out a little bit just because it looked like they were trying to go at him with the stuff that happened with Clint and the referee.
And kind of hats off to both Jack Jewsbury and to Nat Borchers. When Clint was ripping up the note card and really getting in the face of the referee, they stepped in, even though that wasn't their teammate, just to kind of help calm the situation a little bit. And so, hats off to them, I guess, for that.
Man, yeah, it was a bizarre one. I remember trying to, shield the referee from him and then thinking, well, why am I doing that? Because he's obviously going to dig his own grave here. So I just kind of let him do whatever he's going to do. And then I saw him grab the referee's card and just start tearing it up. And I just really couldn't believe my eyes. I just never, it's something that you want to do as I think every single soccer player wants to do that in their wildest dreams when it's just like they're fed up with officiating. They want to do something about it. But he did it. He actually went there and did that. And I just remember being so shocked that my jaw just hit the ground. And I was just like, he went there. He really must have been pissed off about that call. I mean, the game's already over. Like, what's going on?
We were all around the ref, kind of. I wasn't really arguing. I don't think I was really arguing with the ref. But seeing the ref writing something down, and then Clint, obviously in his ear, and then taking it, throwing it, and I thought, that's another red card for sure. And then Clint starts to walk away, and he pulled out a yellow, and I was kind of relieved. I was like, oh man, we got away with that one. And then Clint wrapped around, started walking back towards him, and I was like, oh no, he's going back. Saw him rip it up and then throw it. And I said, all right, that's got to be at least another yellow, right?
If you really dislike the referee's call, that is the ultimate diss. Of course, I don't condone that, but it is something that you think about, of course, as a player. And he goes up and he does that. And then I'm like, wow, he's actually doing it. I cannot believe he's ripping up that note card. That is just incredible. And now I'm just wondering what is going to happen next.
But to see Dempsey do what he did was horrifying. In football terms, he should never have done it. He apologised days later. Wasn't the most fulsome of apologies, which maybe suggests something of Dempsey's attitude. But it was just a remarkable sequence of events that would, in the near decade of the Sounders in MLS existence, mark out, I think, their darkest day.
I don't even know where he thought to grab the book and actually riff it up. And who knows? Maybe in his mind the game was already over. We're down 3 now. What's it matter if I do something silly? And obviously does something that he probably wishes he hadn't. Looking back on it, but it is something definitely I've never seen, and I assume it's just out of complete frustration.
Just to top things off, when you think the night couldn't get any more bizarre, you realise at the end of it, Ziggy Schmidt, the Sounders coach, didn't coach the rest of the game from that Dempsey moment. But he was so riled up at what he'd seen that he took himself away from the coaching position. And I think he went and stood in the bottom corner of Starfire Stadium and watched there, because otherwise, as he was then quoted in the post-match media scrum, he would have, quote, choked out the referee.
And I remember Siggy Schmidt storming out of the game. That no one even noticed that.
Yeah.
He left the game early. He walked right by our bench and started yelling at us. So, and then after the field, it got pretty tense too. On the pitch between the coaches and players. Obviously, everybody's going to remember the Clint Dempsey. A lot was made of that as them being down men. But really, the game was over when they lost Dempsey. That's why he lost it.
And that just sums up an evening that the Sounders completely lost control. From all levels, it went wrong. And Ziggy naturally regrets those comments. I don't think he regrets saying what he said about the quality of the referee. We could all agree Daniel Radford had a terrifically bad game that day. But to hear a coach he's looked up to and is so well respected in the game say those things, no wonder US Soccer came in with sanctions. But you add all those issues up in totality, and it was just a terrible night for Seattle.
Yeah, we're up 4 guys on the field, and there's nobody pressuring you when you have the ball. We still had a few minutes that we needed to make sure that we took care of business. So until we got that 3rd goal, we definitely felt safe at 2-1, but once we got the 3rd, that definitely closed it up. But there were some, again, I think the tackles were still flying. The frustration was definitely there. I think for us, it was more just about move the ball. Don't let them even get close to you at this point. The game's over, and we're moving on, and they're not.
It was weird. I remember standing there with Adam Quarce, and we were just counting the number of men on the field because we just kind of lost track. You just kind of lose track in the game of how many guys have been sent off. Didn't really comprehend, I think, until that moment that Oba had gone down. They didn't obviously have another sub. And then just thinking, oh my God, there's been 3 guys sent off and 1 guy injured, and they're down to 7 men. And the hardest part about that was like seeing the game out, knowing that, and thinking, well, in the back, what if we gave up a goal to 7 men, And I remember just like being so tentative with my passing. And there was tons of space. But I do remember one player, Justin Rose from their team, was everywhere. He was running his ass off, and it was pretty cool to see, he still had some life, and he still had some energy, because he actually made it kind of hard for us, even though we were playing up 4 guys.
It became comical, and at the time, what was there, 7 of us left on the pitch? We weren't finding it funny. We were just gonna run our socks off and tackle hard and play with pride and just keep on going, because at the end of the day, that's what the fans deserve. And there was no way. I think a lot of guys would have thrown the towel in, and it's honestly a really proud moment for me looking back that you're playing with 7 guys against 11, and we all just kept fighting. We all just kept fighting. We knew everything at that point was stacked against us, but we still had time to play. And, with the way the game had panned out, it was just like one of those things that you never know what could happen. Let's just keep going.
I knew we were at our limit, and obviously I'd never played at that before. I wasn't really thinking of that. I don't think I had any cards, or, that wasn't really on my mind. It was more of, filling spaces where guys weren't defensively, and then, looking for advantages if we could break, if somebody was up, or the right time to break or not, to try to get up the field. But, at that point, there's little time, there's little men.
it's a difficult situation for everybody.
I just was trying to think about how I wanted to walk off that field and if I wanted to like diss the Seattle Sounders fans or do something like that, because I was just so kind of fired up by the whole situation of like the way that the Sounders fans or players had handled things. I thought it was really sad, disappointing that they would kind of stoop to that level with what Clint did, and I just didn't think that they had handled things with a whole lot of positive energy at all. It was really kind of strange, and you could just feel the air just taken out of that stadium. And it was only the Timbers fans who were there chanting and excited about what we had just done.
There were some things being thrown from the stands, which you don't like to see, but it is what it is. Yeah, at that point, you're just kind of waiting for the match to end and deal with all the rest of it after the game.
I remember getting hit in the back with a water bottle. I remember things getting just pelted on the field, and we were just there a couple weeks ago, and it obviously wasn't as bad. But I'll be honest with you, it's the one game where they're like touching distance to you.
There was a whole hot dog that was thrown down at my feet, which I was kind of baffled that somebody would buy a hot dog, hold on to it for 120 minutes, and then choose to throw it. But, to each his own.
No, I've never felt that way, and I don't think playing in any competition in this country where I've at all felt threatened or felt like fans were being overly abusive. The fans were fired up, and they obviously had a right to be, in some respects. In other respects, they didn't. I think they were probably just as hurt, to lose, and the way they lost, was pretty brutal as well. So I think they were all pretty fired up to have that happen to them.
At that point, most of the fans were kind of hanging around where at the bottom of the stands, where you kind of have to walk through them. There was a few that had some kind words for us off the, as we were making our way through that pathway. But at that point, we were just kind of talking with players, really from both sides, and everyone was kind of in disbelief a little bit as far as nobody'd ever seen events culminate like that before.
That night in May will be forever remembered for the Sounders for derailing their season, and for worldwide media for providing them with a spicy bit of video and copy, because Clint Dempsey's actions went worldwide. I remember the day after, tons of my friends and fellow broadcasters from England were saying, "Was that you last night commentating on Dempsey? What the heck happened?" This had a huge viral impact.
That match was assessed by somebody from U.S. Soccer. We completed all the paperwork in the locker room. We got showered up. We went to the hotel that the out-of-town officials were staying at for the assessment debrief. I didn't even leave for my house until almost 1 in the morning because all of those things took as long as they did. When you have an hour's worth of paperwork that needs to be submitted, the assessment debrief took a long time, dissecting different events in the match and just kind of describing and learning from different reactions to different scenarios. There was follow-up. I know for all of the officials, we had to talk directly with U.S. Soccer when they were deciding what the punishment would be for Clint Dempsey. Really, they just want to make sure that all of the events that took place, events that were described in the reports, were accurate, and so they have a full picture of what all went on.
Clint Dempsey would end up being handed a ban by U.S. Soccer that has kept him out of U.S. Open Cup competition to this day. For the Sounders, the effects of the red card wedding were even worse. Obafemi Martins' injury not only sidelined him for a significant time, but in conjunction with Dempsey's 3-match MLS ban and time with the U.S. men's national team, it helped derail the Sounders season. The team would fall from its place amongst MLS's leaders into a place that would send the club spending in the summer transfer window. Though the team recovered to make the playoffs, it bowed out early, and some suspect the lingering effects of 2015's swoon helped pave the way for Sigi Schmidt's 2016 departure.
Yeah, it screwed us. Yeah, you always look back on a season and say these were pivotal points. I even look back on last season and say the home opener, we lose 1-0. That was a pivotal point and a pivotal game. And to lose 1-0, it kind of sent us on a crap run, to be honest. Maybe if you look in years past, the games that we won, the first game of the season at home, we've gone on a run and we've put ourselves in a good position. So I think there's always going to be games where, you look back and that was a pivotal part of a season where who knows? It's hindsight, If we field a second-rate lineup and we lose 2-1, but we have our guys healthy and we win the Supporter Shield, it's like, man, great coaching, great, this, that, and the other. But if we start the lineup we did and we win 4-0 with even subbing those guys on, it's like, wow, great coaching, and we go on a run. So it was like a comedy of errors, and
it's difficult to say whether that was the end for Ziggy Schmidt in overall terms. There've been a couple of moments in years previous where he was significantly on the hot seat as regards his future as a Sounders coach. He managed to ride those storms out. He'd always been allowed to go and invest in new players, and the front office had shown tremendous faith in him. So I'm not sure you can say that was a definitive moment, but I think it was a turning point for Ziggy. The season never recovered from there. And in the end, Seattle looked as far away as they ever were from winning MLS Cup. Maybe that was a foreshadowing of what happened the following summer when Seattle just had to act. So I don't know, because he had another year in the job. Some might say he could have gone sooner. Some might say he should never have gone as the franchise coach. But I don't think that night did him or Seattle too many favours in what has been a fabulous near decade of existence as an MLS franchise.
That near decade would culminate 17 months later when the Sounders lifted their first MLS Cup in Toronto, a turn that allows the red card wedding to be cast in an entirely different light. Had the Sounders parted ways with Schmidt, continued to struggle, and not have the glory of 2016 to fall back on, the red card wedding may be a defining moment in the franchise's modern history. Instead, one of the most absurd nights in North American soccer history can be looked upon as unreal, cast as fantasy, and given a title more befitting a work of fiction. Interviews for this program were conducted by Jeremiah O'Shan and Chris Rifer. Thank you to everybody who gave time to the project: Nat Borchers, Brad Evans, Ross Fletcher, Jeff Hosking, Lamar Neagle, Caleb Porter, and Andy Rose. Thank you to the Seattle Sounders and Portland Timbers for their help in putting this program together. This has been a production of Nos Audietis, and remember, you'll never yacht alone.
I expect a LAFC who's motivated to prove themselves at home, to prove to their fans that they're capable of winning in this league. And it's up to us to really brew in the party. You guys like that? No? Awkward joke, dad joke right there, huh?